Hello, and welcome to Season 7 of the FODcast, the podcast focused on the future of digital commerce hosted by Simply Commerce. Season 7 promises to continue to bring you some of the industry's brightest minds across the globe as we unpick the sector and where it's heading. From war stories to strategy and technology deep dives to future trends, we cover it all as we continue our journey to have one of the most popular podcasts in commerce. Before we start, if you enjoy our content, please do hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on, like and share on socials. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast, the future of all things digital commerce. Today, I'd like to welcome Steve Irwin, Chief Commercial and Technology Officer for Vivobarefoot. Quick disclaimer, I don't own any Vivos, however it's a brand I've long admired due to their position in the market. Before Vivo, Steve's background is focused heavily in the sports and outdoors industry, with leadership gigs at Hunter's Boots, Wolverine Worldwide, and ASICS, amongst others. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me on, and glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. Really do admire your background, given my interest in the sports industry myself. I think before we start, do you want to just go into a bit more detail around some of the roles you've held in the past?
Yeah, definitely. My career in e-commerce and coming into the sports and outdoor space actually started from university time. So when I was at university, I was a failing professional rugby player, so I wasn't getting anywhere with rugby, and decided to pivot and actually start an e-com business. So I started a online e-com business at a time when there wasn't a whole lot of them around, and therefore things were easier and harder because the path wasn't trodden very well. So there were some things that you had to work out yourself. And other things were easier in terms of lack of competition on things like paid search and whatnot as well. So the learning curve was steep, and that was my entry into the space. So it was I was selling triathlon products online, and that was an exciting time for me. I moved on from there into a number of kind of retail roles, working for companies in the cycling and outdoor space. So Chain Reaction Cycles at the time were the biggest online bike retailer in the world. So I joined them. They didn't even have a head of e-com position. It was actually a buyer and trading role that I took there because the role at that point wasn't even really properly established. But it was basically end-to-end buying and sourcing product, trading it online, digital marketing strategies then to get it out the door and convert that into dollars. I then moved into a pure play role with Science and Sport, which was into the health and nutrition space, and took them from a 3% share D2C business to a 50% plus D2C share business. So replatformed the organization really, and took what was an e-com website that was taking telephone orders for stock, and converted that to a intuitive website that allowed them to kind of go on a strong growth curve. And then to the ones you mentioned, then moved into the kind of footwear space from there, really working for ASICS as a digital director there, so managing their e-com platforms initially, and then the role pivoted into a more multi-channel role where I took on all of digital wholesale and strategic accounts as well, which was an amazing role and taught me a lot, but also allowed me to kind of flex some of the skills I'd learned in retail through e-commerce into other parts of the business as well, which was really helpful because obviously when you're working in that space, the wholesale accounts you deal with are also retailers and they're dealing in e-commerce and the same challenges and same space actually that you are as a brand. So made for more meaningful dialogue. And then worked for Wolverine, which is a multi-brand business. So it has Saucony, Merrell, Caterpillar, and several other brands. And that was interesting because that felt more like an agency type role because I was servicing the brands rather than being singularly involved in managing a brand strategy. I was basically servicing an output for across the different brand portfolio there. So that was an interesting role for me and a bit of a change of play. And then with Hunter, it was a very similar role to the ASICS role, just on a global scale rather than across EMEA, and allowed me to kind of look at the markets more holistically across the globe, which was an exciting time.
Nice. It's probably no surprise then to say we're going to be focusing this conversation on the D2C industry, particularly around how D2C brands can stand out. So I think it's probably a good place to start with just the rise of D2C over the last 10 years because it's an area where we have seen a lot of growth and a lot of investment for brands and how they can engage, interact, and sell to their customers.
Totally. Yeah, and it has changed a whole lot. Like I say, from the time where I had my own stab at it, which was maybe closer to 20 years ago now. The space was really uncompetitive. When I was doing Google paid ads, I was one of the very few doing Google paid ads in that category, and therefore the cost of acquisition was so much lower.
Mm.
And actually the pull through, or what was being referred to at the time as a golden bullet, was easier to hit because the competition was so low and the adoption was so slow that actually whenever you did do campaigns in some of these marketing platforms, they were so much more effective than what they are now. And obviously things like paid search, it's a highly competitive space. The winners in that I think are Google for sure, because they just keep putting the rents up, and people are happy to pay it because they know it's where they need to play for share of voice with the consumer. And then in time, more marketing platforms came and rose and fell, or rose and plateaued maybe. So things like social, when Facebook started advertising kind of came on the scene, that became a big impact, and then affiliates and email marketing and all the rest as we go through the years. But within the last 10 years specifically, I think probably what I saw in the sports industry in particular was when Nike pivoted and Adidas started to pivot more into D2C, that kind of sent shockwaves through specifically the footwear industry, because they had been large pure play or large wholesale based businesses where 90% plus of their business was driven through wholesale relationships. They then started to double down and invest in D2C then. And I think other brands like ASICS responded to that a lot slower. I think they're a Japanese owned company, and therefore they tend to be a bit more cautious by approach. And actually it took ASICS a lot longer to pivot and start to kind of gear into D2C. So we saw trends from big brands starting to announce the move into D2C, and people thinking it's almost gimmicky maybe at that point, and then actually seeing the success of those brands by doing so, because Nike was rising fast at that point still. And Adidas too, because they quickly followed suit. And then I think then brands like ASICS then started to react to that and said, right, well, we need to get our act together here as well, and start to invest there. So really within the last 5 or 6 years, then we saw brands like ASICS and other brands start to really put their money towards D2C infrastructure. And then I would suggest that when COVID happened, which was the big catalyst, I would say many of these brands and retail businesses went from basically having digital in a future roadmap view to having to fast forward their digital and D2C offerings by magnitude of 10 years. They've moved forward 10 years probably within the space of two, because they had to. It was kind of an adapt or die situation whenever the only opportunity you had was to sell to people online during some of those worst parts of the COVID period. So yeah, and my time during the COVID period was with ASIC, so I single handedly saw that response. As we went through that, we grew kind of circa 200% during that first year in COVID in the online sales space, because it was the only place that we could really sell to customers. People were out running more as well, and that then kind of gave a bit of a compound effect.
I was going to say, I guess the impact that the COVID restrictions had as well probably meant that more people were shopping with brands like ASICS as well, right? Because they were naturally outdoors more, running, etc.
Yeah. If you were tagging any of your mates, you was tag five and run 5K or whatever, right? So like everybody was doing it. The running bubble really kind of rose at that period, and also the outdoor space as well, because the only option we had afforded to ourselves at that time was getting into the outdoors. So yeah, it changed a lot. And then obviously I was managing the wholesale side as well at ASICS for strategic accounts and digital accounts, and some of the strategic accounts like Sports Direct, they were pivoting fast. They were traditionally a big retail driven business, and very much bricks and mortar based. And they pivoted quickly and started to accelerate their investment into digital at that point. And they're now probably doing a much greater share of online sales now than what they ever were, and that's probably largely driven by the likes of COVID kind of coming around.
I mean, I would agree. I think just on that note, I think something that we're seeing right now anyway is those businesses that I mean, every business's online sales increased substantially over that time and continued to probably up until about last year. We're starting to see a bit more consolidation now, and actually we're seeing in store sales rise again. And I guess that comes to the whole like unified and the omni-channel conversation around having all your systems in sync. But I find it quite interesting that consumers are almost like they want to go back into store and they want to get that in-store experience again, which is quite cool, albeit in a very different way to what they would have had it maybe pre-COVID.
Totally. And I think part of that is like we were starved of experience during that time, really, because we were all working at home doing our Zoom parties or whatever we were, right? And you lost that human experience and you lost that physical touch quite literally during that time.
Mm,
I think as that accelerated, it definitely accelerated and fast forwarded the e-com channel in particular. But what I think I completely agree with you. What you're seeing now is one, because the e-com space accelerated so fast, it probably made a lot of the cost base go up within that area as well. So more competition on, like I say, the likes of Google, Meta, other areas as well. So those spaces all have become more competitive, and therefore the cost to serve is higher than what it was, for even 4 or 5 years ago. And look at all aspects of that, even operations, all other areas. As you build scale on something, then the reality is that a lot of the parties know that they can kind of charge more now because there's more competition for them to choose from. And that's made definitely the cost to serve higher. Even if I just look at CAC rates and acquisition costs over the last few years across some of the businesses I've worked in, they've definitely all been heading north, and that's largely
mm.
because of that competition. And I think the only way that you can really pivot out of that is by looking at your multi-channel strategy and ensuring that you have strong channels across your business, not just in e-com, and not over leverage yourself in that area. And for sure, even at Vivo, where I am now, that's a big area of investment for us, is expanding on physical retail, to really bring that experience forward and give that human touch side, but also because we want to serve the customer where the customer is, and that's ultimately a choice. Not everybody wants to just be afforded the convenience of online. They want to try on the product, they want to feel the product, look at it, and hear the full story behind it, rather than just click on a meta ad or a paid search ad and transact. It's definitely more about the experience as well for some people.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point you touch upon. And for me, that's a big part of the rise of D2C brands, because it's clear, right? If you're selling direct to the customer, you're going to have a better margin because you're cutting out the middle person, the middle store, whatever it might be. You obviously get access to the data firsthand as well, which is going to be super important when it comes to personalization and all that cool stuff when it comes to loyalty. But when you look at experience, like there is a clear demand for customers to feel a brand, particularly at the minute. They want to be involved in the brand. They want to see its values. That, to me, that is how companies are differentiating themselves to their competitors right now. And you can do that online for sure, but you
Yeah.
can definitely do that to a far higher standard and that in store. You can interact with your customers really well, both in terms of their experience in the store, how they're served, and everything else. So for me, that's a really, really important point.
Absolutely, and it's from two lenses. So on one side, if I think about like even just marketing itself, when you look at community based marketing, a lot of that is driven through physical experience. So ASICS has a community based experience called Frontrunner, and it's about frontrunner clubs, and they basically bring people together through that experience. Vivo has a community group as well that it utilizes to basically create physical experiences for people, and that connects then into a retail experience. But it's mainly about bringing people together and giving them that kind of physical touch point. And I think that's one lens where we're seeing some progression there, or maybe some regression from the e-com experience, if you want to see it that way, where actually we're using physical interactions as a means of marketing and pushing that message to customers. But on the other side of it as well, the retail side sees a benefit of it. If you think about even the rise in run clubs and how run clubs are becoming the new kind of social networking or even dating forums for some people as well, where they're coming together and they're doing it
Mm.
through exercise. Like that's all community based, but there's quite often an adjacency to that, to a running store or a retail experience as well. Like if I think even just here where I'm based in Glasgow, you've got Achilles Heel, which is like a really specialist retail environment for runners. like that as a run club. Part of that is the social element, bringing people together, but it also obviously drives transaction through the store. So it's giving them footfall, it gives them engaged customers, which is what we're all trying to replicate in a digital experience. We're trying to create that tangible, real love for a brand in a digital way. But if you can create that in a phygital space where you have the physical interaction and then combining that with the digital element, like it's the key unlock really to really kind of resonate as a brand with customers and also give them what they need in all fronts.
It's funny you say that. It's something that I'm experiencing firsthand myself right now. I've always been into my functional fitness. The last 2 years, I got really into my running
Yeah,
and joined a run club. And they're obviously affiliated with a few things in the local area, which is quite cool. Some of the brands that I follow, they do a lot of run clubs that are sponsored by like Saucony, for example, and what have you. So I'm literally seeing that kind of firsthand. And to me, it's like the perfect way for a business to market itself.
totally. Yeah, so I'm part of a footwear couple. So I work for Vivobarefoot myself, but my wife is working at Saucony. So
Okay.
she's leading a lot of this stuff and community based stuff for Saucony, and it like for her and her business, and we met when I worked at Wolverine, so that's the crossover obviously, but she's obviously seeing firsthand the benefit of this. Like Saucony has been a brand that's been rising incredibly well in the last few years, but this moment of the run club interaction, which really is giving people like I think it gives people a social interaction beyond alcohol or other things in the UK, where people typically form and bond over meeting at the pub, and it's now giving people an opportunity to meet in ways and socialize together in a way that's actually really good for you, and there's so
Mm.
many benefits. It's like a win-win-win scenario, and like I say, the win part for the brand is they're getting love and loyalty from the customers. The win for the customer is they're getting an experiential environment, a point to socialize, a point to bring humans together, and then I guess the win on the transactional side is if there's a retail store or the brand itself is connected into this piece, like then there's also a commercial benefit as well, and it kind of connects quite nicely. So I think we'll continue to see that trend kind of develop and build on it. I guess the challenge is that when all brands see this as an opportunity, then it becomes kind of saturated. So it'll be interesting to see how the authenticity of it remains as more and more brands enter into this space.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel we're still very much at the early stage of this.
Yeah,
But yeah, give it a couple of years, we'll start to see it overdone for sure, and it'll be okay. Well, what then happens? I think you raise a really good point actually there. Um, and I know we're going to talk about community and authenticity a little bit more later on. So we've looked at obviously I guess the why behind the D2C, but there's the why they would do it. But I guess it's not just a case of businesses can say, right, we're going to go and serve the customer. Here we're going to spin up a website. Well, you can now, but for a long time you couldn't. So I guess it'd probably be good to talk about technology itself and how that's evolved over the last 10 years to enable D2C brands to engage with their customers. Because like if you go back to your ASICS days, it wasn't quite as easy to spin up a website and sell into them within a couple of hours or whatever.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure, for sure, and like so, it's a good point because it's all a bit relative, right? Like if you think about those big businesses like ASICS, right? They're a 4 billion turnover company, right? And therefore, the bigger you are, the more slowly you adapt to the trends in the market, and the slower it is for that big ship to turn, right? Because they have
Mm.
so much infrastructure around them. Their ERP system is massive. It's a global ERP. It's servicing multiple markets, lots of complexity in it. And therefore, for them to pivot and change into another area or to just spin up a website, it's not as straightforward because there's a lot of bureaucracy in those types of organizations, typically naturally so because they need to protect the brand at that size and that level, especially with the shareholders they have. But B, the reality is they typically have antiquated structures or infrastructures that were built around wholesale businesses as opposed to D2C focused organizations. So they can't just spin up a Shopify site and not connect it to an OMS and an ERP the same way that, a startup could. They can find ways around that, or they can tune different ways to kind of bypass or gap fill just so they can move quickly. So I think definitely in big brands like ASICS, you don't have the same agility as what you have in some of the smaller brands. I think for sure, like, it's not to say that they don't do things progressively or they aren't agile on the front end, but for sure on the back end and infrastructure side, they're definitely slower. I think when I think about where we are now, you're right. Like the circumstances have changed. Like with the rise of AI, you can brief in AI and ask it to spin up a website in a matter of days. And actually, that's been one of the big challenges that I had with Vivo last year, is that we had a huge influx of counterfeit sites basically trying to spin up Vivo copy websites basically, and they were doing it in a matter of days. Every time we were taking one down, three more were popping up. It was like, wow.
Wow.
So it was,
Okay.
and a lot of that is to do with the ease of creation now of these sites. Not that these were working sites, a lot of these were just front end layers that allowed customers to come in, transact, and for fraud to take place. But that was really damaging for us as a brand, because you're dealing with the PR message, and whether it's you as a brand or not, which in this case obviously it wasn't, you're still dealing with the flack of that. And
Mm.
we also still care about our customers and want to make sure that if they've gone on there thinking that they're getting some sort of deal from Vivo, that the love hasn't been lost for the brand. So that was a big effort for us to kind of manage that and monitor that as well. And the ease of launching those sites now is actually almost too easy. That I think where we're going to end up is a space where you've got such a busy online space with lots of different brands for lots of different things, that actually, when we're talking earlier about multi-channel experience, people will probably crave more experience because they'll be in such a busy space, or maybe even an unknown space, because of how easy it is for counterfeit brands to appear and counterfeit digital products to appear, that they'll want that authentic, real experience because it's safer, essentially. So
Yeah.
it'll
If
just
you
be
if you
interesting.
touch it, you can trust it, I guess, right?
Exactly, right. So that may come, but yeah, I think, like, for me, even on the technology side, I think for us, even at Vivo, like where we're looking to, I think you had the headless trend come in a few years ago, where people are trying to decouple their front end and back ends to make them slightly more flexible, and allow for that ability to kind of shape different parts of the business and at different, I guess, speed levels, without having a back end that restricts certain movements in the organization. We're looking at that, and we have been looking at that for the last couple of years, but we're probably heading more towards a microsite structure where similar, I guess, to a headless principle, but we definitely see that as kind of a future state where you have microsites connected to the base of the ERP, so that if we want to change out our CMS because a new product comes onto the market where it has better facilitation for the things we need, it's easy to exchange that basically with another, rather than us having to be reliant on the CMS that's been highly embedded into our tech structure, that means that it's so complicated to unwind from it that we don't have that flexibility or agility. And I think that's really where the key will be, particularly for the big brands, and, like I say, the slower moving ones, is how they create their technology stacks to allow for more flexibility and agility, even in a large kind of organization. So for us at Vivo, as we're scaling, we're definitely looking to the future, and we're kind of trying to be future proofed in our tech structure, so that we have that agility on the front end to be able to interchange what we need based on the consumer demand, but not completely throw the baby out with the bathwater, essentially, and go through our full re-platform project every single time. We need to make that adaptability.
Yeah, that's what you don't want, right? I think if you're having to re-platform every couple of years, it's going to be a large expense,
Totally.
not just in terms of cost, but in terms of downtime with innovation and other things as well. I'd be interested to get your viewpoint on this, and I appreciate there's not going to be a one size fits all approach, but if you're building a brand right now, at what point do you think, okay, we need to start looking at what serves us here and now
Yeah.
versus, okay, what serves us for the future as well? Because if you're literally just selling a couple of products and your turnovers within a few thousands, you're not really going to be fussed about, okay, what happens when we're selling multi-million pounds? So where would you say that kind of point is where you wouldn't start considering that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say the exact point, because I think, it depends where you are in your journey, and some people are bootstrapping and just getting on, and they're not building out a 3 to 5 year plan there, really. They're true entrepreneurs, and they're making each day work as it goes, and they're reacting to whatever's in front of them in each day. And having been in that position myself at a point, like, I know how you can barely see the trees for the woods, or the woods for the trees. Sorry, in that scenario. So even get into the headspace to be able to sit back and do a 3 to 5 year plan is highly unlikely. So I think it depends where you are. If you're in that space, I can't imagine you're looking at your long term infrastructure. It's probably when you start to bring more people into the business and create then a bit more space for yourself to be able to do that. That's maybe the case. But I'd definitely say in small to medium sized brands, like, really, we look at our 3 to 5 year business plan, and we're trying to understand, like, where do we expect our regional shift to go over the next 3 to 5 years? Where do we see our category shift going over the next 3 to 5 years? Where do we see our customer builds growing over those next 3 to 5 years? And once you've kind of got that foundation in place, and you understand exactly where the markets are you're going to play in, where the categories are that you're going to play in, and the customers you're going to be approaching there, then it makes it much easier for us to kind of develop our technology agenda to service that. And ultimately, technology, I see that part of my role definitely as a service function on the business. And it's quite interesting that I get to wear two hats. I'm wearing the commercial hat, so I'm looking at the future growth and development of the organization in the 5 year plan, and then I'm basically trying to figure out with my other hat, how do I service that through building the right infrastructure, and allowing for the right technology stack to facilitate that. So I'd say, there's no particular moment, but as you build that financial plan and financial model over the 3 to 5 years, and you look at the drivers that sit behind that, it makes it much easier for you to kind of take that bigger picture view to say, okay, well, if we are going to be playing, let's say this isn't the case for Vivo, but if you're going to be playing 50% more in Asia and Chinese markets, for example, because you want to avoid the US tariffs, maybe you then are building an infrastructure that services more towards marketplaces, and you then need, I don't know, a very good DAM system with images that can be ported straight into marketplace platforms, or a PIM tool that will allow you to kind of build out all the metadata and product information that can easily be ported again then into third-party systems. That's maybe your approach. Or if you see the US tariff thing as an opportunity, maybe you're saying, hey, we're going to go big guns into the US, and therefore you want to build an infrastructure that allows you to service the US market well. And then you look at then what is best practice in that market, what are the trends that are coming in that market, what is the expectation of the customer, is it highly personalized, is it localization? They have a big Spanish speaking population in the US. Do you need to offer localization into Spanish as well as English, and consider other aspects? And then you start to build that profile based off of that need. But I think it all starts with that kind of long range plan, and really understanding where you're going to play, how you're going to play, and who you're going to play with in those spaces.
And Joe, I guess that goes down to looking at the business problems and then using technology to solve that problem, right? Do you feel as though having a commercial hat and a technology hat benefits the decisions that are made for the business? Because I guess you're looking at it down the commercial lens, like as a priority. Often I hear about decisions that are made, and they're probably been too focused around the technology and not necessarily the business problems.
Yeah, but I guess I potentially have the bias to go the other way, right? And service more on the commercial side rather than maybe some of the technology based pieces. Because I guess technology for me has probably three elements. One is the things we have to do to be legal and compliant. The second big bucket is probably geared around infrastructure and supporting the organization. So you're talking about anything you need to do through the ERP, IT systems, and any of those things that supports the business. And then the third bucket is the website, and how we generate the website, and other digital aspects of the business, so omnichannel services, and anything that really drives commercial value. So one of them is legal and compliance. It's not going to drive any commercial value, but we have to do it, because if we get fined, we're going to get probably in pretty hot water. The second one is infrastructural. It's the non-sexy stuff, but it's all platform based or fundamental foundational stuff that is going to allow us to do the sexy stuff on the front end that can kind of move the business forward. So it's not necessarily going to give you a big ROI in that space, but it's going to give you the right foundation to be able to go and do the front end stuff that really gives you that commercial benefit. And then that third bucket is really the commercial drivers and what is driving the growth of the organization. And some things are growth driven, some things are UX based, some things are cost saving even or efficiency based within that model. But those are the three big buckets that I look at. And when I'm working with the tech team, I sit down and go, okay, well, what do we need to do to be compliant? Because all of that stuff just has to be done. It's just a hygiene factor that we need to do. The infrastructural stuff that we do to support the growth of the business is, it's probably the hardest one because, whether it be upgrading your ERP system, reviewing, I don't know, a new WMS issue that you have with your global 3PL provider and consolidating that, like there's lots of these big projects or big bucket things that we could do that would make us slightly more efficient or slightly more productive as an organization. But you can't do all of them because they're usually all a money suck and a resource suck as well. So you have to be selective there. So usually on that, it's trying to work out where we're going to get the biggest bang for a buck. And then on the commercial side, usually we use a scoring criteria on that, right? And it's scored in a matrix type scorecard that allows us to understand, okay, does that UX benefit keep customers happy and therefore it might improve our LTV? Does that cost saving issue, does that give us a major cost saving that actually is even better than a revenue return because we can then reinvest that cost saving into talking to more customers or spending that in your performance marketing funnel? Or does the commercial driver, i.e. a new localized site in the Netherlands, for instance, is that going to give us a major benefit because it's going to open us up to a brand new customer segment in the Netherlands, right? And it's weighing those up. And there's a weighted scorecard then kind of then determines which one we then put our investment behind and put our resource time behind, because the amount of things you can do is almost infinite, but the resource you have is very, very much finite.
Yeah.
Working through that.
Well, I like the fact that it all sits with you because you like I said, you went up into those three buckets and you put in a scorecard in place to work out where you would invest, right? So I like the fact that it's just that with one person and not with two because you're looking at it holistically, right?
Like I think that does help. It does. It means it's less me, battling with a CTO saying, no, I'm going to put all the time and resource into infrastructural stuff, which actually won't give us a benefit. It's kind of, I am fortunate enough that I know that I have to put certain investment behind the things that are going to drive revenue gain. Otherwise, I'm not going to hit the commercial number I've put forward to the organization. So it definitely does help me facilitate that and makes that much easier rather than lots and lots of debate on what should we do and why are we not doing all these commercial things, and that bit then definitely is a benefit for sure.
Yeah, so just quickly, whilst we're talking about this, then, and another decision that's been made by Vivobarefoot is to have an internal development team. Now, that's a decision that isn't taken by every brand. Obviously, there's many out there that decide to outsource their development function. So in some cases, their whole IT function. So, I guess what is the key reason that you guys have decided to bring your engineering in house?
Yeah, so we basically have a more of a hybrid model. So we do have an external partner that we work with as well. So it allows us to kind of scale up and scale down depending on the number of items that are on the agenda. Like Vivo has a very big and complex agenda for a relatively small brand. We're kind of 100 million brand in real terms. We're not the same size of an ASICS or a Wolverine, but the reality is for a brand of our size, we have big ambitions, and that's everything from our regenerative mission and how we do take back and returns and repairs and all of those things to make sure we reduce the number of things that go to landfill. If that is our global expansion plans, where we basically service more than 110 markets globally, the number of channels we play in e-com, retail, wholesale, distributors, franchise models, shop and shop models. Like there's a big complex organization behind a relatively small brand. And to do that, you kind of need to be able to be in control of your destiny a little bit, you know. You know, I've worked in both models where I've worked with a business where it has been completely in-house and everything has been done internally. I've worked with completely external as well. Personally, I find the benefit of working more with internal only on the basis of they are brand aligned already, so you don't need to spend the time on trying to bring them into the brand mission because they're bathed in it. They live it every day. We have a very connected organization where we get together at different retreats 4 times a year. So those people spend time with other people. They hear the company presentations. They know where we're going directionally. So they're bathed in everything from a brand perspective. And I guess um, without sounding crass, the difference between internal resource and an agency is an agency, yes, I can penalize them through the contract and whatever else, but through an internal employee, I can motivate them probably much easier on a direct basis. So I personally find having a higher weighting to internal resource helps, and I find my agenda items tend to get completed faster than what I do when I work solely with an agency. That's not to say that that's just me badly managing an agency, right? So it could be the case, but I definitely think I get more output whenever I have an internal engineering team. But as I say, we're kind of working almost hybrid at the minute, where it's probably geared 60-70% towards in-house engineering, and about 30% of our output is done through an agency partner that's been a solid partner for us in the last 6 months we've brought them on. So
Okay.
they're helping us deliver a number of projects that take us away from BAU, that are kind of looking at that kind of forward facing stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I think it obviously you found a good blend then, which is good. And like I said, there's no one size fits all approach
Yeah,
to that question, right? So, however, you feel as though it would fit better with the business. I like the fact you touch upon having the permanent employees bought into the vision and the brand.
yeah,
And it's clear that for someone like Vivobarefoot, that's really important for you.
big time.
And you just don't get that with agencies. So, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, try as they might, they just never get it because they're not living and breathing it, and they're possibly working across 4 or 5 different brands at one time, right? And that's good. Like I say, it gives you a flex up, flex down opportunity as a business, but the reality is they're never going to be as mission aligned or as brand focused as what your in-house team are. We also made the decision to stick with Magento. So we went through a discussion on our Adobe. We went through a discussion on replatform. We've decided that we've put a lot of investment into this asset that we have on the website, and actually right now isn't the time for us to replatform. So we're now looking, like I say, to work towards this microsite structure where we have composable parts within the infrastructure that we can take away and exchange out. However, the asset that we've built on, we want to continue to invest in, and therefore we've in-housed full stack developers and front end as well as back end developers to be able to help support that as we grow and build on this asset.
Yeah, Magento is an interesting one. I feel like it's the most Marmite of e-commerce platforms. They've got such a strong community. That open source community is huge. But then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you've got people that have just been saying Magento's dead for like 5 years, and it's clearly still there. It's like got about a 10% market share for like enterprise retail brands. I mean, it's doing all right.
Totally, and look, you know, as I have to say, so Magento outlives my legacy in Vivo. You know, they've been on it for quite a long time. I've been in Vivo for a year, or just over a year. So that decision basically was concluded before I joined. Whether it's the right decision or not, I think is debatable. But I think platforms are always debatable, you know. And from my own perspective, I'm relatively platform agnostic in a lot of ways. Like typically, they will all do the same thing. Just depends on how you work within them, right? And I think some of them definitely offer slightly more flexibility and agility. I think like Shopify can be great for, you know, turning things around relatively quickly. And Magento definitely requires a lot more customization, but by going through that customization journey, we typically have more personalized features on our site than maybe what some others would have out of the box, right? So I think there's yeah, it could be a long debate. Will we stay on Magento forever? You know, who knows? We kind of keep the right to review that on a regular basis, but to the earlier discussion, I definitely don't want to get into a position where you're having that re-platform discussion every 2 to 3 years. Building kind of a microsite structure allows us to almost create a composable element so that the e-com piece could also be replaced. So if we decided to step away from Magento and bring in Shopify in 5 years' time, then we could do that if we so wish. But that for me is more the important part, is creating an infrastructure that allows for that flexibility and discussion, and then we kind of just take it as it comes.
Yeah, who knows what other platforms will be here in 5 years, right? So-
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Okay, so in your opinion, then, how can a D2C brand thrive in the market right now?
Yeah, I think actually it's probably a lot of what we touched on a little bit earlier in the conversation on that authenticity side, right? So I think the barriers to entry for D2C brands are relatively low now in a lot of ways, right? You can get a website set up in Shopify relatively quickly. You can generate a lot of content through ChatGPT to populate that site. You can source a product in Asia or somewhere else, or bring a product to market relatively quickly, right? That's the first step. But the second step is obviously then coming into a very competitive space and navigating that in the right way to be able to build and develop the brand in the right way, and resonate with customers in a very busy space where attention spans are low, and cost to serve can be relatively high, depending on what approach you take. So I think for me, once you've come through those steps and you're at that position where you're talking to customers and you're marketing your brand and you have all your ducks in a row, the key part is going to be remaining authentic, because there's going to be so many brands in there playing in a space that they're doing it inauthentically, because they either are just trying to pivot to adapt, or they're trying to just basically make a quick buck, or whatever the motivations are. The reality is, for me, you can't lose that authenticity. Like, Amazon being a completely consumer centric business and never changing that model is that way for a reason. They're the biggest D2C potentially retailer in the world, and they're that way because they continually make the consumer at the center of everything they do. And I think if you take that approach as a D2C brand, that the consumer is number one, no matter what you do, the only way you're going to really keep their attention and stay engaged with them is through authenticity. And I think, you know, just when we were talking earlier about community, I think that's a big part of it. It's like, how do you bring them into an experience that connects them to more than just that transaction? Like, how do you make them feel that when they come and buy their Vivos, that they've joined an exclusive club of Vivo wearers, and that means more than just that transaction at the point of till, because genuinely for a brand like Vivo, and I say this authentically, like, it's more than that for them as a business. We are trying to fulfill a mission to try and reduce the amount of product that's going to landfill, and to do that we need to be as authentic as possible, because our customers need to believe what we're pushing is the right approach. They also need to have faith in our supply chain, that we're doing all the things humanly possible to make sure that that's as efficient as possible. We're offering services so that they don't need to put product to landfill. We will recycle them, or we will repair them, and we will make that journey much easier for them as well. So creating authenticity behind that, and also then bathing it in a community that makes people feel like they're part of something more rather than just a transaction, I think is really important in the D2C space.
Okay. So, as we touched upon earlier, that the community element and involving yourself within that community is starting to become harder. It's becoming more common, and over time, we're going to see that take an impact in the results that D2C brands will receive off the back of it. So, how do they navigate that? Is that not possible right now, or how do you see that developing, I guess, over the next sort of 12, 18, 24 months?
I do think it's possible, but I think, like, you have to be doing it with the right reasons. Like, you have to be doing it because you believe that you can, whether it be, let's just use an example, a practical example, like say it's a run club, you're a nutrition brand, and you want to start a run club because you want more people to test and trial your products in real time, to be able to then go on and take a journey with the brand, right? if you're doing that for the right reasons, you're basically going to set up and facilitate a run club that is probably free of charge from them to attend. It's a sampling opportunity for you as a brand for them to test it, trial it, and determine whether they like it. It's also a good opportunity for you to get feedback from customers and treat it almost like a focus group environment as well, so you can get direct feedback on your products. And if you're taking that insight and you're using that to develop better products or improve products or do any of those things, like that's legitimate, and there's an authenticity to that. And customers aren't stupid either, like they will determine that as well, and they'll also have the right to choose. So like it's on you to use that in your gift to be able to develop your products, bring your products to market in a way that then serves those customers as you gain those insights. But also then find a way to lock them in. So like what is your then tie to have them then stay with you as a partner? Is it by joining the Run Club, you have an always on logged in 10% off on all of your nutrition purchases for life or for the time that you're a member? Whatever it is and whatever the mechanic is, it needs to be authentic, but it's on you to, as a brand, I think, to really determine how you take that from a point of application to locking them in then into the brand and making sure that that's done in a way that's as authentic as possible.
Yeah, I think that leads on to a bit of a loyalty conversation as well, which I find really interesting because for a long time I felt brands can do a lot more to retain their customers. I've always been one that's very much out to get the best deal.
Yeah.
Um, so I've always been, like, well, why am I like that? And that's because I don't feel as though anyone really makes the effort to try and know me as a customer.
Yeah.
But interestingly, um, I had Sam at Talon One, I had Fiona from Loyalty Line on the pod at the end of last year, start of this year, and they were telling me about what some of the brands are doing from a loyalty point of view, and I found it really cool. One of the
Mhm.
best ones was AU Vodka, and
Oh,
all of
yeah.
their top tier loyalty customers get invited to a big party once a year. There's like thousands of people turning completely free. It's a massive event, and obviously that is cool for the customer because they're going to this exclusive event for the brand. Off the back of that, they're getting some amazing marketing, completely, well, I say completely free of charge. It's not free of charge because they're putting the event on, but
Yeah.
they're getting X amount of thousands of people posting all over socials. They're creating that buzz, that community. They're giving back, and in turn, they're going to go and buy some more AU vodka directly from them. So they've got it sort of pretty good. I'm sure that, I mean, that's just one example. There'll be loads out there.
Yeah, heaps, man, and like yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? That touches three things. It's the community aspect. It's UGC. They're creating all the content coming out of the back of that, and it's experience. It's like just what we were talking about. It's as much as it depends on the category. Of course, if it's an FMCG category and it's a consumable item, maybe it is slightly more transactional, but it doesn't have to just be transactional. It can be kind of something where you feel like, at least you're getting more from it. And if it's kind of point-based scheme that then leads to something like that's going to bring great engagement. Things like footwear, it's kind of tricky because typically you'll have, people purchasing that one time a year, maybe two times a year, depending on how quickly they go through their running shoes or their shoes in that category. So, you need to find a way to stay relevant to those customers in the moments where they're not buying, right? And one of the things that we do in Vivo is we obviously offer services for repairs or returns on your product. So that's one area. Another area is V Health, where we have kind of health workshops and digital content that allows you to then engage. And it might be a yoga session. It might be a barefoot fundamentals course. It might be a barefoot running fundamentals course where you start to really understand your body and understand the benefits of the product. And that's important to do, not just from a locking customers in perspective, but it's also important to do because it means that we're being responsible as a brand. Like we're really guiding you on your barefoot journey, which is different from when you're wearing a standard pair of cushion shoes or shoes that don't give you those same benefits.
Yeah, more than 100%. And I mean, I think that's actually really cool. So I wasn't aware that you offered that as a brand.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing I like about Vivo is you've got that whole sustainable doing the right thing piece, but actually you've also got the barefoot feel as well, which I think I don't know enough about it. So forgive me if I talk about this slightly naively, but there's a big drive, a big community of people that really feel that kind of foot to ground, barefoot feel, and being able to educate them and the wider audience on that is only going to benefit the brand. And like you said, knowing you're doing the right thing to educate the right people.
Definitely,
Uh,
definitely. Like the thing is with that, so there's two elements to it, right? For us, one, there's the physical benefit of barefoot shoes, because essentially when you go into a pair of barefoot shoes, your toes get to splay as they're supposed to. Like if you think about traditional running shoes, your feet tend to bunch up slightly, and your toes tend to suffer in that. So that's how you get corns or bunions or different things in certain shoes. So there's a physical benefit because as your feet splay, your feet are able to strengthen and develop. So there's a physical benefit that we can communicate and we share with others, but there's probably more of a philosophical or psychological benefit as well, right? Because what we also do is it's a zero drop shoe, so essentially there's no cushioning below your foot, so you feel more, and you feel more
mm,
on a literal sense, and you feel more on a figurative sense, because you're literally becoming closer to nature essentially by wearing barefoot shoes. So there's kind of an ethereal element to what we position the brand as well, because if you think about even during COVID, something we talked about earlier, like I spent a lot of time when I could then in the outdoors, and I just felt like I was one, I felt like the stress levels kind of dissipated quite a lot. And then obviously there was the physical benefit. So the physical benefit was I was out moving and walking in nature, and I was kind of getting all the physical benefits that come with that. But I was getting a lot of psychological benefit from that as well. And the freedom of feeling, humbled by Mother Nature or whatever you want to call it, right? Like there definitely is an element of that helps then your psychological health, I think, as well, and that's something that we genuinely lean into because it's important to us. We meet as a team in nature. Like we have a lot of our senior leadership team meetings around a campfire, and that's literally done on the basis of we feel a more creative probably in nature, but b it's legitimate to our mission, and it's legitimate to what we see is important in the world, and hence why we are a regenerative brand, because it's not about taking away less. It's about almost trying to create a brand that gives back more rather than just extracting resources from the earth.
and I remember when you first told me about the outdoor meeting stuff, I thought that was really cool, and I absolutely love it. I've long said we need to do more outdoor meetings, activity, team building. Even just when I take a call, I like to walk around and what have you. And it's just you. We're not designed to be sat behind a desk or behind a screen. Do you know what I mean? We need to be out at one with nature and just breathing in nice air.
Totally. Oh, totally.
uh,
Totally.
so I love that. I love how you push that through, and obviously that builds the community and what have you too. So cool. Okay, so look, just quickly then, if you were a D2C brand, I know you're probably going to say answers that are focused around community and authenticity and what have you. But what are the three areas that you'd be investing in right now?
Yeah, I would say three areas. It is a sliding scale depending on the size of the business. So obviously if you're in the early stages, you're going to invest in something slightly different than what you would as a mature business. I'll maybe flip this and tell you the three areas that we're investing in Vivo, because we're a mid-sized business, so you can kind of maybe get a bit of a view on both ends. So if I look at the three areas that we're investing in, we're investing in ReVivo, MyVivo, and ReVivo. So ReVivo, essentially, we're investing in the production element of our product, so ensuring that we have the highest quality in our product, essentially, which means looking at loads of elements behind that. That's looking at how do we make our materials easier to recycle? How do we source better materials to get better quality feel on foot, and all of those things? So ultimately putting product first, and also using that in a mission driven way, so that when the product comes to the end of its life cycle, it can be recycled and put back in a way that is right for the planet and for the customer. The second part is probably ReVivo, which is infrastructure. So we're investing a lot in infrastructure to support that future growth. So something we talked about earlier. We have been on a rapid growth journey for the last 5-6 years really as a brand, and what tends to happen is as you grow up quite quickly, you tend to have infrastructure that's not fit for purpose anymore or for the future. And I always liken it to, you're living in a 2-bed house, and all of a sudden your family grows to 5 people. So you start putting extensions onto the house, and And actually, before you know it, you have this house that doesn't make any sense with a bathroom up in the attic, and I don't know, maybe your kitchen is somewhere where the living room should be, right? And that's just the nature of growing up quickly, and it tends to happen quite often from a technical and technology perspective. And in real terms, what the best thing you could do is probably flatten the house and rebuild it from scratch, but that isn't an option because you're having to live in it while you're doing it, you know. So the bits that we are looking at is to try and say, okay, where do we see our business in 3 to 5 years time, and how do we gear our infrastructure to support that growth and support that part of the business. So I'd say definitely our Vivo and how we shape the systems and infrastructure of the organization is critical. And then the third and final part, and it's also one you touched on, it's my Vivo, and that's basically our loyalty and customer experience piece. And it's bringing together all the different elements. You said, you know, you hadn't heard of V-Health, which is kind of our content platform or our health-based platform. Other customers also haven't. I know you're not a customer, but customers that we have also aren't aware of it, because it's really hard to house all of those things together. You know, if somebody is just coming to purchase and they're coming to the website and buy a product, they maybe aren't exploring all the different facets of the site to understand that that's available, or that ReVivo as a returns process will allow them to return their products, their old shoes and whatnot as well. So through a loyalty lens, we're building a MyVivo platform that is fully connected and allows us to kind of bring all of the different elements that the brand offers, bring that together in a digital space, so that connects both to our digital space and also our offline spaces like our retail stores, to really bring a unique experience that is authentic, that is community driven, but also gives real value in the brand beyond just the transaction. And you know, we have so many of these things that gives value beyond a transaction, but we're just not very good at bragging about it. We're quite a humble brand in a lot of ways, and actually it's not that we necessarily need to shout about it. We just need to make it easier from a customer experience perspective to experience all of those things. And that's a big area of focus for us. So we're really trying to drive loyalty and a bigger sense of connection to the brand through that MyVivo lens.
Well, I think what's clear from what you said, I love the ReVivo, ReVivo, MyVivo. Like the business is about Vivo. Like everything that we spoke about today, you can really feel and see like the how important it is, like the business mission and values. So in everything that you said, from just the names of Re R and MyVivo to actually what they all mean and do and their purpose behind them.
Yeah.
I think it speaks echoes about the brand, and I love it, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I would add, I think when you are a brand which sells a specific product to target a certain type of individual or whatever it might be, i.e. in this case, you've got the shoe which is targeting individuals that want to be barefoot. It does really help you dial in, like it helps you have an identity. And when you've got an identity, you can then really focus on your authenticity and
Exactly.
tapping into it. I think if you're a more generic brand where actually you're just selling products as cheap as possible, it's going to be far harder. Um,
I
but yeah,
totally agree. And you talked about it earlier, like there's a big piece of consolidation, and I think and that's happening. You see it, like the market's becoming more polarized in a lot of ways. Like you have consolidation at the high end luxury space, and you have consolidation at the lower end. And actually the brands that are getting squeezed the most are the ones that don't have that identity, where they're just offering a Me Too product, and they basically are just trying to sell it for either as cheap as possible or sell as many as possible, and usually those two things are linked. And actually they're the ones that are really suffering here, because the margin will dilute for them as well as they do that, and it'll be much harder for them to add that value. So I'd definitely say if you're a D2C brand out there and you're feeling like you're in that space, you probably need to look at how you invest some of that profit into developing a greater identity, and really building on that identity to drive authenticity, and you'll then develop an LTV that is much more appropriate for your brand. You know, you want to be driving that longer term value, because you know, obviously it depends on the product. If you're selling a sofa, you maybe are just thinking it's a one and done deal, maybe. But you know, if you've got any future aspirations to sell to that customer again, or for that customer to go and tell people that they had a friggin' amazing experience with your brand, like you need to be thinking about the long term. It can't just be transactional. And I think you're spot on. It starts with identity, and then that builds on authenticity from there.
well, I don't know if you're anything like my wife, then you won't just be a one and done with a sofa. She wants to replace ours every 3 years. I think we're still paying our one off, and she's already looking at new ones. So there we go. But there you go. That's it. How I guess how to thrive as a DC brand, have an identity. Like
Yeah,
definitely, I would agree. Brill. Well, look, I think that's a good place to wrap things up, Steve. Love it. Really appreciate your time.
no problem.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this one. Thank you very much for joining me. And I hope everyone else has enjoyed it as well. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And please do like, share, and spread across your networks. And I'll see you next time.